You are listening to the Elemental Podcast.
Shut up!
Welcome to my mind. My name is Al Nichols, and you're listening to the Elemental Podcast. This is entry number 117. I'm home alone, and there are two criminals. No, I'm home alone, and that doesn't happen very often. I mean, not on Monday nights especially, but normally the times that I have the place to myself are on Thursdays and Sundays, and that's because my family, they work for a church, and so that's their nights, right? Even with them not meeting in a physical gathering still, and probably more likely for the future too. They do live streaming, and they're pretty integral in making that happen. So they're not here, right? There's a good 4 or 5 hours where I just have the place to myself. And it's kind of great. It's also a little frustrating because, for example, the other night I tried to sit down and do this recording, and I couldn't get through it. I was dealing with weird sinus congestion, which I've dealt with a lot when I try to record podcasts, and I was also just dealing with an inability to focus. I haven't been tested yet. After learning a few things and trying a few things out that I've learned from people who have ADHD, I'm pretty certain that explains so much. And it's a little frustrating because had I been tested when I was a child, again, another thing that went right through the cracks of my mom's, parenting me. But I would have learned early on in life, and I don't know if I would have been happy with the therapies when I was younger, but at least it would have given me some idea of what I'm up against and why people's advice and how to approach work. Because look, I've always been told, and I don't know if this is a lesson that a lot of people learn, but people who are neurotypical, they talk about when you start the day, you overcome the biggest challenge you have in that day, and everything else is just downhill. But for me, trying to do that for most of my life just means that I get stuck on that, and then I don't do it, and the entire day passes me by, and I lose another day. I just lose another day of progress. And when I think about my work and everything that I've tried to pursue and do, this is what I see constantly. It has to be and then I realize something. I never start a day, ever. I've never started a day in my most productive days doing that thing. And then the other day, I heard someone because I started following a few people who talk about being, or having ADHD on TikTok. And, because it's short videos and totally holds my attention. No, but I was just watching someone who was explaining this, and they're the way that they solved it, the way that they're very productive, is they don't do that. And it's something I talk about all the time, and I've never thought, oh my God, I'm sabotaging myself every day, and it's advice that I give literally to everyone about larger scale life, not about how you plan the day. But the advice they said was it's that advice, right? Everyone says you start your day with the biggest thing, but he's but I don't do that. Instead, what I do is I actually go into the day and I start with little small things, easily accomplishable things. And because I don't have that motivation, what I can produce is momentum. And you know me, how many times have I talked about having momentum and not being able to pick up momentum? And it's because every day I've always started out trying to do the biggest goddamn thing that I can do, and I always fail at that. So it was comforting. It was nice to hear someone say that. And so I actually tried that for the last couple of days, and damn it, it's worked. Like today I started just, a couple of small things, right? In fact, I was just talking to an artist friend not long ago. They put out a very earnest like Facebook post, and they were saying that they're very frustrated and they feel like they could be doing a lot and they feel like they're missing out. And I've got about a decade on this person. And I think like people my age are, unfortunately, we say shitty things to people. I don't, but I'm saying like, there's a tendency with people who are in my age group to say shitty things to younger people because they're like, well, this is just the shit you have to go through and you got to battle it out and you just got to force yourself to do it. And as if it's like, like it has to be hard, right? It was hard for me. It has to be hard for you. It's the same shit you hear when people are defending like the government not paying for, state colleges and education post high school. Because like, well, I had to pay for my education. You should have to as well. But I'm not shitty like that. I don't care. I want people to actually not have the burden of debt. And I want to see people succeed even when I'm not even capable of doing that myself sometimes. And I gave this advice. I gave this exact advice. It was on a bigger scale, but it was like, I said, do anything but that. Do everything but the creative thing you're trying to do. And do these other things and write it down on a list and check it off. And that will give you momentum. And momentum is transferable, right? It's like you don't have to do that thing to get the momentum. You just can get momentum. And having that reflected back to me, but put in a different aspect of that's how you do your day too. Not just your long-term goals and how you ease into creativity. But it was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Why was I not seeing it for this, for this aspect of my life that I've constantly like, getting up in the day and you feel excited like you're going to do something and then you do nothing because you tried to take on the biggest thing of the day, right? You tried to make it like you have one big project a day and that's the only thing you have to work on, right? So you take away this tendency to have to, work on a bunch of other shit. But you know what? I don't work well that way. I like having other little things to do throughout the day. So what I did is I restructured everything in a way where now what I do is I work on the small stuff. Maybe it's fulfilling an order, which is pretty easy, right? You print a label, you throw it in a package, and you get it out in the mail. And what I would do in the past is actually kind of like push that later in the day and try to do other projects. No, that always needs to start in the day, because if it doesn't, then sometimes it just doesn't get done, right? And while I've gotten much better at shipping things out, like, definitely on time at the very least, I always feel like in the day that I'm wasting a significant amount of time. And for whatever reason, I've always approached it like you got to tackle that big thing. You got to have these. It's just not the way to do it. So today I did a lot of small things, and here we are. It's almost 9 p.m. in the evening here on Monday, June 14th. And I got a lot of shit done today. I did a lot of cleaning, which I haven't done in a while because I had that momentum. I had that energy, right? And I just hung up this, even though, unfortunately, the curtain, I took measurements too. And either the curtain is short, which maybe I should measure it, or I just screwed up and got lazy with the tape measure, which, I'm thinking that's probably more what I did. But I thought the ceilings were 8 feet tall. Unfortunately, I was wrong. They're 9 feet tall. And the curtain is just about a half foot short. And there's about a half foot gap at the top where the bar goes, and that can be adjusted. So yeah, I could have like a nice long curtain that's touching the floor right now, but no. So that's why you take measurements. You don't just, I think this is about 8 feet. This thing's about 6 feet. So yeah, I got 9 foot ceilings. I had to write that down just in case I need to know that for the future. But that was easy enough to fix. The bar is still good. I just got to pack up this curtain and send it back. And I ordered new ones because I'm trying to get things a little bit more organized. I'm trying to give myself a little bit more definitive space. It's nice to be able to block off, even having this one panel up next to me and the divider, right? The screen, the fourfold screen that's next to it, which has kind of been my de facto wall, like creating this very fort-like barrier. This is actually helping. This is helping a great deal. And it's nice and dark over here, which I really love, even with the kitchen lights on. Because I'm always being affected by people using the kitchen and their conversations, and I can put on headphones and all sorts of stuff, but it's nice to have this sound muffling. It's great. And it's also really good for recording. So anyway, I got a lot of stuff done today. I'm very happy about all of that. I think you can hear, the positivity kind of exuding from me. And I'm just hoping that I can get through this recording before anyone gets home. Because like I said, don't get a lot of windows and a lot of opportunity, and in the right frame of mind, with clarity and not fighting allergies or some other sinus thing. So, yeah, there's that. What I wanted to talk about, and it's because this week I'm actually celebrating a 1-month anniversary. That's right, I'm celebrating an anniversary. I've been back on gender-affirming medications since May 19th. And at the end of this week, on Saturday, will be 30 days. Well, actually, maybe it's the 18th. I don't know. There was 31 days last month. But anyway, my 1-month anniversary is this week. And it's a big milestone for me. It was one of the many things that I wanted to tackle. And I needed a win. I definitely needed a win. I've been dealing with a lot, with health. I have a thyroid issue that I'm still waiting on test results for. And I figured it was an issue because I've been eating pretty good. I've been cooking a lot lately, which is kind of a new thing that I've been doing. But, and I actually found out that I'm actually really good at cooking. I already talked about this before, I believe. But anyway, I really, really enjoy, cooking and eating better and generally feeling better as a result, right? When I eat junk food, when I eat fast food, I just, even if it's the only thing I ate that day, and it technically can fall into like the intermittent fasting thing minus the keto side of that. Still, I just feel like garbage, and obviously I'm just not really losing the weight that I feel like I should have lost already. And so that's one thing that I'm going to be continuing to deal with in the weeks to come. Hopefully going to be able to get on thyroid medication. I mean, I know someone, or I think a doctor, not just someone, but a doctor mentioned that there could be other issues, and potentially thyroid cancer was one of them. And, I'm not going to jump to that extreme. I don't think so. There's other symptoms that would go along, with having cancer that at this point I'm not really feeling. And I know just throwing that out there is kind of a little, haphazard. So apologies if that triggers anyone or makes anyone concerned. I'm not concerned. My doctor's not really thinking that that's what it is, but, it is one of the possibilities, right? That's why I'm getting tested. That's why I have been tested. And I'm just waiting on results and seeing what happens. And if it's just a low-functioning thyroid, then there's medication for that. And that's great, because that means my thyroid will start working again, and I'll start losing weight, and I'll be very happy about that. Though, I think one of the components was being off my gender-affirming medications. Well, anytime I've been off of it in the past, because I have been on them for, I want to say, since 2013, 2014 mostly. So I've been on them for I would say 8 years, but it's more like 7, because I ran out at the beginning of last year and I couldn't replenish my supply. I couldn't get access to Spiro, which is really the only thing I was taking for a very long time, for years, like probably 5 years. And before that, I was taking both Spiro and Estrogen. And I've taken that in a variety of different ways, sometimes with a patch. Sublingually. It's like I gotta force my mouth to work, like sublingually. But yes, I've had to, it's been a real war being able to get access to my meds. That's had a lot to do with the fact that I never saw a doctor. I'm sure I lied, even on this podcast, which you're not supposed to do, right? Because that's the rules that I made, right? That I'm transparent and I'm honest here. And I try to be to the best of my ability. But this is not one area. Well, this is one area, rather, that I did not want people to follow me on. I did not want to co-sign someone's irresponsible behavior because I knew it was irresponsible behavior. I knew that's not what I should have been doing. It was very dangerous long term. Like early on, maybe not, right? If you don't have any other health factors, then okay, you might be fine. But as you're taking the medication, you're supposed to get your blood tested. You're supposed to see where your levels are at, because you are messing around with your body's chemistry. And having a doctor involved in that process is actually vital. It is important because I even remember having sometimes things that I wasn't sure was side effects, and I was too afraid to reach out to a doctor because, well, I'm doing this without a doctor's supervision in the first place. And I don't know what could happen. I don't know if this could, gatekeep me in the future from being able to get medication. And also just the simple cost of not being able to afford seeing a doctor or insurance rather. And then, then having to actually pay like a foreign pharmacy to get my medications was really expensive. So this has changed. This has changed dramatically, but let me go back. Let's start at the beginning of this journey because I don't know. I mean, I really haven't been honest and forthright, about how I got on medication in the past. So let me start there and we'll work our way forward to today and we'll talk about the major differences, the huge changes that have happened in a decade. So I started my transition back in late 2010. That wasn't I wasn't pursuing medical therapies at that point. What I was trying to do was, ease into my new identity, right? Revealing that part of my life to many different people. And I had these phases. I did this post a long time ago that originally was called Why I Cross-Dress and Other Various Facts. And then maybe a few years later, I amended it and I updated it, did a version 2 with a lot of the same information. But what I called it at the time was All Dressed Up and No Place to Go, which had changed by that point because I definitely was out and about in society, living in Los Angeles and living my best life. But early on, I just thought I was cross-dressing for a very long time until WeHo WeHo Halloween, which is another big event. And I went there in, 2010 or 2011. And like I said, there was a long stage before that. So I think it was actually I think it was 2010. And it's 2010. So anyway, back in 2010, I went with my aunt, who was the first person I came out to, and her husband, who was... he was a libertarian guy, right? But he was very cool in a lot of ways, even though I had a lot of issues with him. But when it came to the LGBTQ, he was very progressive, right? He had a sense of, I don't care, right? Go do whatever you want. And his attitude more was because he was a rocker, right? Before he had his brain tumor and it impaired him where he couldn't play the guitar anymore. He was kind of a rising star, at least in the Hollywood scene, and I don't know. So in that way, he just kind of looked at it like, well, there's glam rock, and he's like, I totally wear makeup and everything, and that's the way he wrote it off, right? But he just genuinely was not a person who wanted to get entangled in other people's lives, live and let live, that real attitude, and that was very cool. But I came out to Hollywood, and I dressed as Alice in Wonderland. And very embarrassing costume, right? I cannot look at the photos of that because I was still very big at the time, pushing 280. And, I don't know. It was so difficult, but I pushed myself to do it. And I actually had a really good time. And so I went out with my aunt and I had such a wonderful time. And then the next day, I'm processing that information. I'm processing the attention that I got. and I'm processing just how it felt. And the thought really did hit me like, well, what if this could just be every day? What if every day I could go out and I could, because I wasn't using that really to wear a costume. I was using that to not deal with societal judgment, right? Or perceived societal judgment, right? And so I went out and had a great time, and I had a lot of very encouraging people, and it was just great. It was a wonderful experience, and it genuinely put me on the path of, I don't know if I can just go back to living the other 364 days a year. Not really living my best life, right? Like not really being me. And I'd already had those feelings for quite some time before. I had been in these cross-dresser groups, talking to people and not really, like they were helpful to many degrees. And I'm actually very appreciative of that time and the perception and the perspective of people that I spoke to back then. But there was something very clear that started to come across, and that is we have very different reasons why we do what we do. Sure, I love feminine clothing and feminine expression, but it's more than just that. Right? After I take the clothes off, I don't go back to just being a guy. Like in my head, then I deal with strong gender dysphoria and things that I didn't really have a good understanding of at the time, because Christian kid, grows up, and even though I was away from it, just adjusting in the chair here, and you're going to hear everything. I turned the limiter off on the mic just because I'm alone and it's quiet in here. So, but anyway, I was this Christian kid and didn't have any perception of what it was like, to be someone like me, someone who had a better insight, right? Someone who was actually walking this out in their everyday life. And in Orange County, that just doesn't exist. You don't really, now you probably do more often than not, but it was just something that I didn't encounter very much. Very frustrating, very isolating experience and existence. And so, anyway, sorry, I'm a little distracted because my upstairs neighbors are clomping around. They do this a lot. It sounds like they're, I was about to name a very large, animal, but I mean, I'm not calling them big or anything like that. It's just their stomping is so loud that I don't understand what they're doing. Anyway, aside from that, but I didn't have anyone to really talk to. So had I would have had a better idea of what I was going through. And that's eventually what happened. I talked to someone who was transgender, and I heard their story. And things started clicking for me. I'm like, oh my God. And then I started to really follow that idea further and really researched it. And I'm not a person who jumps on labels very quickly. In fact, when I started this podcast, even though I was very much in a process of transition and living day to day as a woman, I wasn't even ready to come out and say that I was transgender. I was actually kind of afraid of I don't know, I felt like, people were okay with the cross-dressing part. Okay, you're just a weirdo who wears women's clothes. The being transgender part was just something that took a little bit more time. So anyway, I eventually started to open those doors and ask those questions and found members of the community. And one thing I started doing after that Halloween was I had connected with a few people, not only online, but actually just going out into Hollywood and going to Hamburger Mary's and various places. And I would find people in events where I could dress up, and I was around community. And I would go to these events, and a lot of times it would be mostly cross-dressers or drag queens, and that was cool. But I found myself more gravitating toward people who identified as being transgender. And that's when the picture really started to come together for me. And that's when I had people around me as I explained what I was feeling. And they were like, you're describing gender dysphoria, right? Which doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exclude people on the outside, right? But if you have gender dysphoria, usually means that you're trans, right? It's like one of the big things, but I'm not gatekeeping, right? I'm not saying that. I just want everyone to understand that I'm not one of these people who thinks like you have to fit in this certain criteria to say you're trans. No, if you feel in any way that you identify with this and that your gender is not necessarily a strict binary, or that it is a binary, but it's not the binary that people have been identifying you as, then you're trans, right? I don't need you to prove it to me. I'm not Calvin Gara or Blair White or one of the other random assholes out there who, have caused a lot of damage and put out a lot of damaging rhetoric and hurt people. Anyway, like I said, I'm in a good mood, so yeah, I'm chatting my head off here. But as 2012 rolled around, and I was still living with my mom at the time in Orange County, in the Anaheim area, where I am now. And then I moved. I moved to Texas, and I was living with my aunt, and I saw that as an opportunity to start the next chapter of my life. And so while I was living there, I went from going out to many different various events, because I found a way to get out like at least once a month. And I was also doing a lot of stuff, in my room, like in private. And then also trying to venture out, not even just in events here in Orange County. Like, again, today, another picture, right, of me going to the Dark Knight Rises premiere, and I had like a specialty dress made. And, it's actually kind of cute. Looking back on it now, it's cute. Even though I did go through a cringe phase where I'm like, oh God, like what was I thinking? But now I look back and I'm like, aw. And, but yeah, I started to push myself more and more because I knew that's where I was going with my life. Well, and it's not that my mom is a major critic or anything like that. It was just transitioning around her was very difficult. She didn't get angry or mad or yell or scream. She just got quiet. And, in some ways that's maybe more terrifying to some degree, is when someone just goes quiet. At least for me, it was like, just get angry, do something, please. But, honestly, like it just kind of triggered me too much in childhood when I did often speak up about these things. And then I just felt like it was all, swept under the rug because she didn't know how to deal with it. And I was left to deal with it on my own, right? But anyway, so I moved to Texas. It was a Houston, Texas area, and I started to live my everyday life. I started to dress more femininely, wearing makeup like all the time. And if I wasn't wearing like a full dress, I was always at least wearing a skirt and tights and stuff like that. And depending on what area of Texas we went to, as well, I was definitely a little bit mindful of, that it could be dangerous depending on where you were. And I figured that out pretty quickly. But, we were there for about 6 months. And during that time, we had made a decision to return to Los Angeles. And, I had decided that I wanted to start with hormone replacement therapy, that I wanted to start the actual physical medical process of transition. It was still pretty early on, like even though it had been a couple of years, just that social transition was still happening. But I thought, like, as I'm in LA, I know that this is what I want. There's no doubt in my mind now. And now that I've, gone past the insecurities, I know who I am. In fact, and when I would deal with criticism and I would deal with people who would literally mock me and criticize me out in public, because that happened a couple of times in Texas and it was terrifying, just because I felt very defenseless. Like I didn't know how to respond, and I've never been a person who's good with conflict anyway. But, I realized like even in the face of that, there's nothing inside of me that wants to deviate from this course. I already know what I want. And so if that's what's going to come with it, then I'm ready for it. And, so it wasn't just, about passing, right? Like, I feel like that's always something that you have to be careful about. Like if it's just about passing, This isn't a decision that you make lightly, though it's not one that should require tons of hoops, and it's just absolutely awful, all the new laws that they're trying to pass, especially to stop children, like parents, who support their children. And because even I had a friend who was not into the idea of children transitioning, and just kind of bought into a lot of the ideas that it was very dangerous and you can't play with a child's hormones and stuff like that. And I'm like, look, your hormones are already doing shit when you're a kid. And if you're transitioning, and you're young enough to know it, and I don't know, like, why do we need to gatekeep this? Why do we need to say that, if the child doesn't have their parents' support, then why can't they do it? And even when they don't, like, why aren't we going to support some kid? It's like, they know. I knew when I was a kid, if I had only had resources like counseling and therapy, and had some examples in the real world to kind of, like, because only thing I had was cross-dressing and drag queens. And I was like, well, I'm not gay. And that's kind of a big component of drag queens. And that's more performance as well. So I guess I'm just a cross-dresser. If I had, like, now today, people have better representation. Still, far from like great representation or even good representation, but we have better examples. There is a social conversation. The word transgender is commonly known, right? Either it's been vilified or or people are having honest conversations, or they know someone who's in transition or has come out, right? So because I knew we were moving back here, and I wanted to start that transition, we actually were making mini trips out here to Los Angeles to look at condos. My aunt was renting because of her husband's life insurance, and because of a malpractice suit that she had won, because one of the other reasons I was living with her, she unfortunately prayed victim. And I've talked about this in the past, so, if you want to hear that, I'm going to start reposting a lot of the older episodes from the original feed of the podcast onto here, like once a week. Go back to the beginning and just start, pushing them back out again so that there's a home for them, because they've kind of been out there for a long time. Anyway, so we were making a lot of weekend trips out here to Los Angeles. And we were doing that because we were looking at condos. And we had a realtor, and they were doing the footwork for us. So they were pounding the pavement, getting us listings. And so we were coming out here pretty frequently. We had a little bit of money, right? And I had actually, I had about, well, I'm not going to tell you how much money. I had a decent amount of money at the time, because, things have been pretty good in my life at that point, right? I made some good decisions. But anyway, when I came out here, I decided, like in Texas, it was going to be a different ordeal. And there were definitely like strict rules and policies, and finding even a doctor there, because I had done like maybe a couple of weeks of looking. It was hard enough just to even find a doctor for like general care. It was a totally different issue to find a doctor who would actually work with a transgender patient. And so I just knew, and it was also a bunch of like other rules, like, laws actually, that were very problematic. In California, not as bad, but sometimes you would deal with a doctor who had kind of like an outdated playbook, wasn't really current on research, didn't really know anything about transgender people. And, so you kind of had to educate them. But still, some doctors had some policies and rules that you had to kind of abide by. And I was desperately looking for a doctor where, there was no ridiculous rules, right? Like, it was clear up front that I'm a transgender patient looking for gender-affirming care. And so after a lot of searching, I found this one particular doctor in West Hollywood. And I had read reviews online on Yelp about them, and it seemed like, hey, okay, this person, they seem pretty progressive. And I was looking at their patients, right? And I'm like, okay. And I had seen a few transgender patients as well, and they were giving glowing reviews. And I was like, well, that's great. Though you can't always trust Yelp, right? I'm just going to put that out there. In fact, don't trust Yelp. Don't trust Yelp. They're kind of a disgusting company. If you've ever watched that documentary about like how Yelp actually works and how they extort businesses for large sums of cash so that good reviews kind of like, anyway, just don't trust Yelp. But anyway, at the time I had looked them up and I was like, great. And so I knew I was making a trip out here and I scheduled an appointment. And so one of the days that we had free, I had scheduled to drive out and go ahead and see this doctor. So while my aunt is back at the hotel, right, I think she got a massage or whatever. I didn't really even talk to her about this either because I didn't really want to have I don't know. It's not that I didn't trust her input. It's that, I don't know. I wasn't sure how she was going to land on this. So, and I guess I didn't want to have any conversations about it. I just wanted to have like a little privacy in this matter and know what my options were. And I don't know, maybe I anticipated a little bit of pushback, based out of fear. So maybe that's one of the big reasons why I didn't want to have that conversation with her. Anyway, that's really not important. I went and saw the doctor. And I was in the office for maybe about 4 hours, and they did a blood draw and they did like a few tests. And, basically it was just me filling out a bunch of paperwork and information. And, I was pretty clear, like what I wanted at that moment. I knew that I wanted to be on Spiro, I wanted to be on a testosterone blocker, and I wanted to be on estrogen or estradiol. And I was looking for I think I was looking for the patch at the time. I don't even know if sublingual. I'm sure that has been around, but there was also injections. But I was kind of afraid of needles. At least I thought I was. At least doing that myself every day. I don't even think I'd want to do that now. But I might work up to it. I don't know. It's hard to say. So I saw the doctor, and we had a conversation. And the entire time I'm there, I just felt like I was being judged. I actually kind of felt like I wasn't being taken seriously. And, and it was the doctor, right, whose name was on the practice. But it felt weird. It felt like I was being interrogated. And I expected that I would be asked questions, right? Like, some litmus test, But, I'd come in. I was dressed, kind of androgynously that day, but I was wearing makeup. And he makes some statement which, to this day, is just absolutely unforgivable. He makes a comment. He's like, are you trying to pass? Because you're not really, passing at the moment. And I'm like, what? And he's like, oh, it's just because, usually my patients, when I have a first time consultation with them, they're wearing dresses and pantyhose. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, this was the way this guy was talking. And I'm just kind of looking a little dumbfounded, like, I don't know, because I didn't know my clothing had anything to do with this doctor's visit, and I felt like I was dressed fine. And also the idea that I wasn't passing or whatever, but it was like, what an asshole, like seriously, and just so inappropriate. And so look, I just sat there and I wish that I had kind of defended myself and like stood up to this asshole. But at the same time, I'm like, I just want to get on medication and I don't want to ruin my chances of that. And I was very young and naive at the time too. Like I said, I wasn't ready for confrontation quite yet. That's when my friend came along and they prepared me for confrontation. So sometimes you need the right people to come in your life to help you with things like that. Make you better and make you more of a badass. But I wasn't there quite yet. And anyway, I was expecting to at least get some sort of medication or something that day. Instead, the doctor just kind of dismissed me and wrote a recommendation for a psychiatrist. And that was the most like traumatizing thing that had happened to me at that point in my life, because it was just kind of like, I don't believe you, and really the psychiatrist stuff is so the doctor has someone who can co-sign or really just pass off the responsibility to and not really deal with the patient. And so honestly, like, this is the kind of doctor, to be honest, that I wouldn't be surprised at all if I found out, like, the only way that you actually get treated for, by him as a patient is if you sleep with him. Right. So I left that office and I felt very defeated, and, went a couple of weeks, and I was just kind of in a depression. And, because look, I knew that I could go see a psychiatrist, but it was just like, I don't know, that was just, it was so shitty. And I didn't want to have to go through like 10 sessions or whatever before I could convince someone that I'm a transgender person and I'm looking for therapy to help make my life what I know it should be, to help make it better, right? And I don't want to tap dance for anyone. I'm not going to show up in some doctor's office with pantyhose up to my tits and like clicking in high heels and wearing makeup and then like having to strip all my clothes off and sit in a gown, and like, fuck no. I didn't want any of that. And I know that's not what happens with a psychiatrist, mind you, but still, it was a very demotivating experience, and it really just made me not trust doctors. And I've already had a lifetime of people around me who don't trust doctors. I already have a lifetime of no one in my family ever taking me to a doctor when it was probably the most necessary thing. They were just total phobic around doctors altogether. And I'm not afraid of doctors, at least not logically. And I believe in medicine. I believe in drugs. I believe in all of that. But getting into a doctor's office has always been kind of a challenge for me, because I'm dealing with something like invisible, like an invisible enemy in my brain that's preventing me. That puts weights on me every time I try to pursue these things. So as I made progress lately, you can understand that I take a little bit of pride in that and a little feeling of accomplishment, because while it is a very normal thing that people do all the time, it has really been a struggle for me just to do this very simple, normal thing. So I'm going to take the win. Not that anyone's trying to take that from me. But anyway, so after that, I went online and I started looking into, well, can you get the medications? Otherwise, it's only prescription. And yeah, they're only prescription medications. And there was a very kind of strict process of you getting access to them. But I actually knew people like, face to face, who they didn't go see a doctor. They got their medications online because they had transitioned a long time ago before there was any help from doctors. And they knew where to go. And a friend had told me about like an online pharmacy that they used. And I went online and I found this pharmacy. And you fill out a survey essentially, right? And they write you out a prescription, and then they fill the prescription. And so I got medications from a German pharmacy. Not that the service was German, but I don't know exactly how it works behind the scenes. My understanding is, and I could be wrong, that you're dealing with probably some company that's based in China, right? And they have their own doctors and pharmacists, right, who can legitimately write a prescription. And so that's all they do, right? They get like an intake questionnaire and okay, do you have any health complications? No. Have you any heart issues? No. What are you seeking treatment as? Transgender patient. Okay. And you fill out all these questions. And then at the end of it, you put in your credit card or banking information. However, they can accept payment, because that's never consistent. I've had to do bank transfers and wire transfers and stuff like that, and use obscure services, because sometimes someone has denied them service because what they're doing is illegal. And not that you would necessarily get in a lot of trouble here in the States for it. I don't know anyone who's gotten any serious trouble, because these aren't scheduled drugs, right? This isn't a narcotic. This is but it's just prescription drugs. So the worst that I've seen happen and experience myself is they confiscate them. Okay, right, whatever. Though again, please don't take this as a pass, like I'm encouraging you to do it, right? Or that there is no consequences, because yes, there can be. I'm just telling you that I've never experienced them, fortunately. So, and I'm pretty sure that the medications I got were legitimate. But see, that's a problem in itself. I shouldn't have to be pretty sure. I should just be sure. If I go to a pharmacy here, I can take confidence that I'm getting it from a legitimate pharmacy, that I'm dealing with a pharmacist who has 10 plus years of education to even be a pharmacist, right? Like, you have to actually go through more schooling to be a pharmacist than even to be a doctor. I'm dealing with someone who is like dealing with, like, protected medications, and there's shipment orders, and they're dealing directly with like there's things to give me confidence. I didn't have any of those confidences ordering from a foreign pharmacy, but I decided, fuck it. I'm getting on medication. I'm transitioning whether people want me to or not. So I found an online pharmacy. I knew what to get. My friend had told me what I need to find. They also told me that I need to go get blood work drawn every once in a while too, just to make sure that my levels, and I never did that. Like, I never got blood work, drawn, and I don't know why. Again, just an aversion or a fear or whatever, but I was like not doing that. But anyway, I got my medication. And what I got was 50 milligrams a day for 30 days. But when I first ordered my medication, I stockpiled. I got about 6 months worth of medication. It was actually a little cheaper. If you can afford to do it, it's a little cheaper to do it that way, right? And so I was able to get like 6 months of Spiro at 50 milligrams, which is the starting dosage. Or at least that's been my starting dosage, and that's the starting dosage of a lot of other people I know. And then also estrogen, which I actually may have been taking more, like maybe 4 milligrams at the time. And there was a couple of ways to take that. One was a patch, right? I think that you can do a spray too that absorbs into your skin. Here in the States now, what they do is usually sublingual tablets that you put under your tongue. You let it dissolve, so it doesn't process through your, it goes through the veins and vessels in your tongue underneath it, which, yes, is a thing. So I took a combination of both, but early on I took the patch, and the patch you usually wear for a week. But then over a little time, maybe about a month, I noticed that the patch kept falling off and I couldn't keep it on my body. And so I was having to use like medical tape to keep it on. So after that, for like the medications that I ordered, I just did sublingual tablets. And that was fine for about 6 months. I was on transitional, therapies for hormone replacement, and it was working. It's so funny because I look at these pictures of, I don't know, it was probably like when I first moved to LA, it was like early in 2013, and I had just started medication then. And by the end of that year, I looked cute as hell. My skin had cleared up because I had always dealt with like cystic acne, and so nothing really changed that at all. And again, didn't see a doctor, never saw a dermatologist, so never got any help with that. But when I took the medication, my acne completely cleared up. And I was also having like laser hair removal at the same time. And there was a lot of things that I was doing, and it was just, I was so happy. I can't tell you how happy I was. And I had some concerns, obviously, because I wanted to be able to chart my progress, and I didn't feel like I could do that. But I was really happy, and this went on for about a year. I continued on medication for a solid year, and just reordered again after 6 months, and restocked, and because I had the money to do it, and that was fantastic. But then, I don't know, somewhere around 2014, early 2014, I went back to restock my stockpile of meds, and the pharmacy was gone. And, trying to find a new one was very difficult. There was a crackdown, and a lot of them had disappeared overnight. And I was just, there was a period of a couple of months where I was off my meds, and look, that can be very dangerous, right? It's like discontinuation of meds without a doctor's supervision, especially ones that I had been on every day for over a year, for transitional therapy. Like, shit. And a couple months later, I was finally able to find the pharmacy. They had put up a new mirror site, and I was able to get medications again, but it was a little bit more expensive. And so I couldn't get them in the big stockpiles like I had before. And then also by that point, money started getting a little tight, right? My own personal reservoir, my piggy bank that I had been living on for about a year was depleted. And my aunt's money, because she was very helpful to me and probably gave far more to me than she should have, just to be perfectly honest. But, she was being affected by, just job insecurities, and also just, money was disappearing. And it wasn't like, I didn't feel comfortable going to her and being like, hey, can I get like $600 to buy some meds? So I bought like a month's supply, and then I would stagger along after that for the next like 5 or 6 years doing that, staggering along, and sometimes falling off medication because the pharmacy was down, or didn't have the money to pay for the medication because my own personal finances got worse and worse over the years, and still had no health coverage. And, all this nightmare, right? Just trying to live my life and get the medications that I needed. And, what became very clear was finding estrogen at a reasonable price, and that wasn't an injectable, because all I could find was injectables. And I don't know, it was already kind of fishy getting from like a foreign pharmacy, even though like I had checked it online and it was a real German pharmacy, and they had different rules there, so it wasn't as prohibitive, for them to get me the medication. But still, I don't know, just getting an injectable. And it would have been through a different pharmacy, and it would have been through like, I believe Hungary or something. And I just was like, I don't know. Right. And also just like at the time too, they weren't doing you had a larger needle, right? Nowadays you pull everything from one syringe, and then you transfer it to a smaller one. And then you inject yourself with a smaller one, right? So it's a lot easier. But at the time, that's not what was presented to me. And I saw the needle. I'm like, nope, can't do that. Can't. And so eventually I ended up not continuing on estrogen, because it was just, there were so many issues with like keeping on it. So, and then I never elevated my dosage of Spiro either. I stayed at 50 milligrams for all that time. I never went up. Normally you do. You start to increase over time, because you start to gradually, continually reduce your testosterone levels. And then you help, produce more estrogen in your body. And also, you combine that with actually taking estrogen. And so that's the process. So just the inconsistency of being even able to stay on that medication, and the cost of trying to, continually buy it. Like I said, stayed on Spiro for way too long, and just at 50 milligrams. So this continued all the way up until last year, and I was in the apartment. The last apartment that I shared with my roommates, and they had just moved out, and about a week after is when I ran out of meds. I had stockpiled a little bit, because I had a credit card, and something that I've like got in trouble for, because it was like a business credit card, right? And so I put that on there, and totally stupid. I shouldn't have done that. But that's what I don't know. That's what I decided to do at the time. And since I've made right on that, but I got that last bit supply, in late of 2019, and by March, it was gone. I tried to kind of slowly dwindle down, right? Like, take it every other day. And then as I got to my last 5 tablets, I stretched it out over, I stretched that out over 20 days and, just broke them up and then, just spaced them out and then skipped a day and then skipped a day here and then skipped another day. So I was finally out. And, then the pharmacy that I had gone through disappeared again, and I don't even know if it's back up online because at that point it wouldn't have mattered. I didn't have any money anymore, and I don't know. I was like, and I'm like, I've been doing this the wrong way, and I'm tired of doing everything in my life the wrong way. Even if I feel it's right, this is not the right way to do it. And I had so many things going on with my health that I was genuinely concerned. I'm like, if I just, get back on this medication and continue with it, it's like, I need to find a doctor. And I thought that would have been a process that I was going to do a lot faster. But, of course, like life hit me, COVID hit us all. And then I end up getting forced out of that apartment. I keep saying forced out of that apartment. I don't really mean to say that. It was a shitty situation, but I was going to have to move out of that apartment at some point. And honestly, that was the point, right? Like, that was the point that I needed to get the hell out. And I had already well overstayed my welcome anyway. So when I left, I moved here, and I've been here ever since. And honestly, I had bigger fish to fry, and I just kind of thought, and I didn't really have the money to go see a doctor. And like I said, did not want to continue doing it this way that I had been doing it all these years. So over the course of this year, I've started to, it happened slow because, I was on Spiro long enough where I think it did have a long-term effect even when I was off of it. But as the end of the year came, I started to notice some physical changes happening again and just a reversion, right? Like more masculine features being prominent. And, as I got here into 2021 and February rolled around, I was like, man, I want to go see a doctor. I've been fighting with Medicare or Medi-Cal here in the state of California, trying to get insurance. And, I'm still actually fighting with them over that. Cause like, even though it's like I have to have an interview that I keep missing somehow, and I don't even know that I'm supposed to have an appointment because I don't get any paperwork in. And I think they're still sending stuff to a different address. And then I had to transfer from Los Angeles's Medi-Cal system to Orange County because I am living here. And, but anyway, I was just very disillusioned. I'm like, God, I just want my medication. And I know that this is like a contributor to the fact that, like why I think it is genuinely one of the factors of why I've continued to put on weight. And even my doctor agreed, like, you being off your medication for this long, it can have other effects, like maybe not a direct effect, but, an indirect one. And also just my mental health had just gone to shit, just dealing every day, gone from like barely ever dealing with gender dysphoria to now like every single day, avoiding mirrors or reflections. It's a lot harder than it sounds. And because every time I look in the mirror, every time I catch my reflection, every time I just saw something, like the post office was a torment. This place was like very 80s, and all the windows were like mirrored, had that mirrored reflection on the outside. Even inside, I couldn't escape it. So I would like literally not look at the door going in, but then I'd be inside and I'd forget about the mirrored glass that they have that separates the mailboxes from the main post office center where the registers are. And I catch my reflection there every single time because it's also like a little bit of a fun house window, right? There's a warp in it. At least that's what I tell myself. But I was looking at myself. I'm like, fuck. And it would just destroy me over and over again. And then not seeing any progress. And it was just enough. And I just kind of felt very hopeless. I was very down and fighting this intense mental battle at the same time, this depression. And then one day I was on TikTok, and there is a person, a transgender individual named Rosalind Montoya, or Rose. And she or they, because they are non-binary as well, but I believe that's her pronouns, is that she or they. I'll say anyway. I was watching one of her videos, and she was talking about a service called Plume. And if you don't know what Plume is, it's spelled Plume. I'll leave a link in the description on the show notes. But Plume is a service that basically offers solely gender-affirming care. And it is a much broader definition than it was in the past, because it used to be like strict, like male to female or female to male. None of the non-binary, none of that stuff was included. With doctors, like you talk that way, and honestly, they would just reject you for service or whatever. But anyway, I was hearing about it, and I kind of thought it was a little too good to be true. I'm like, what? You mean I get on an app, on a phone call or a FaceTime, and I talk to a physician, and then I get my meds? It's not the way it works. And I looked into it because I was curious, and it was about like $100 a month, which, is a little bit of a commitment. But I'm like, I was paying $140 a month for just Spiro. I kid you not. Like, some of you have been on therapies before, and you've paid out of insurance, and you know how much it costs at a pharmacy, and you're like, what the hell? Yeah, $140, because you're paying the online pharmacy fee, you're paying a foreign pharmacy, you're paying for international delivery, and you have to pay for express delivery because you do not want to risk it not getting to you or taking over a month. Every time I went with like the baseline shipping, which was like, it wasn't cheap either, it was $14. I would end up waiting a month or longer, and it would cause a discontinuance of my medication in the meantime. One time my medication went to American Samoa. So yeah, you have to pay for the express, because then it'll get there in less than 7 days. And that's like $40. It's not cheap. So I did all of that. And I did that for years, $140 every single month, or every month that I could get the money together to do that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm doing actually okay right now. I'm a little financially stable. I'm not really spending money. I've gotten a few kind of self-destructive behaviors under control, managed for the time being. And this is toward my health, of course, so that's very important. I'm not going to deny myself something that I actually would benefit from. Because I've gotten a little frugal, maybe a little too much frugal, a little too frugal, rather. But anyway, I was like, sure, all right, I'll try it out, and I'll see what happens, because the worst that happens is I pay $100, and they don't give me care, because that's kind of what I was anticipating. Or they're going to be like, you have to jump through all these hoops. But I'm like, at this point, fine, just point me at the hoop, and I'll jump. And I went on Plume's website, I signed up, and then they refer you to another app that they use called Spruce. And Spruce is like a medical charting, like it's a service that a lot of doctors use, but Plume uses it as well. And then I was signed up and ready to go, and I had my first meeting with my physician. And they were based out of San Francisco. And they are a non-binary person themselves. And it was very cool, because it was just the nicest, sweetest person that I've probably ever met, and was really just wanting to listen to me and encouraging me to kind of share my story. And at no point did I feel unsafe. I didn't feel like I couldn't share my past medical history. I believe when I first signed up too, maybe I had a form, and me, I like to talk. So I'm like, sure, I'll share my story. Here we go. It was a dry and cold day in Texas. So I did all of that, and they're reading from that, and they seem actually pretty moved by my story, and were very, very concerned about the fact, not that I had taken medication, but the fact that I wasn't able to get it, and how hard it's been for me to get back on gender-affirming care. And we talked for about a half hour, and we talked about the medications that I wanted, and we generally just kind of traded a few jokes, and it was great. It was really wonderful. And at the end of that, It was like, okay, well, we're going to start you off. And I'm like, what? I'm getting medications today? Yeah. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. What are they? A couple $100? Cause I'm asking for both. Cause I didn't know. I really didn't know. I thought I was paying maybe somewhere. Oh God. But, no, in fact, I got my prescriptions and it was given a 50 milligrams a day for Spiro, but also given room if after a couple weeks I want to up my dosage. There's no problem with that. Go ahead. I can go up to 100 milligrams a day. So now I'm on 100 milligrams a day, a Spiro, and I'm on 2 milligrams a day of estradiol, which is estrogen. And so far, the effects aren't like huge, but they're noticeable. And I am noticing that like my face is starting to resemble a little bit more like a recognizable form. And that, my spirits have changed a little bit, just like, maybe biochemically in my brain, or even just the knowledge that I'm on this course again has been like affirming and comforting. And yeah, and I feel like there are other effects that I'm starting to notice very gradually too, just in my body. And it takes a long time because look, I've already done this before and I know what the process is like. And I'm very familiar with like, that it's a journey, right? It's not something that happens overnight. You don't wake up and it's a magical transformation. As much as we would like that, that's just not the way it works. So I've been doing pretty well. Like this past month has been great. And there's a great comfort in knowing that I don't have to go find my medication again or wait a month. I can literally drive up the street to CVS and they have 2 refills waiting for me, ready to go. And here's the best part. It's not $140 for one medication. It's not even $140 or $100 for that matter for both. No, it's $30 freaking dollars. $30 freaking dollars for, why am I saying freaking? Okay. It's $30 for both my medications. And that's a 60-day supply. Plus, I got 2 more 60-day refills coming up. And actually, the Spiro is no longer a 60-day supply. It's a 1-month supply, technically. But still, I've got refills. And yeah, I will continue to see my doctor. In another, maybe in less than a month now, I will go and I will get blood labs work done. Hold on, I didn't say that right. I'll go get labs done for my blood work. And I'll see where my levels are at. And they can show me like typically where they would be and where maybe they should be. But, they're very flexible. It's not like they don't follow some strict adherence of what transition is. They listen to their patient. They hear what they need, what they want. And they understand that not only am I transgender, but I'm also non-binary. And yeah, so this has been a very easy journey. A lot less complicated than it was before. I'm glad. Like, I'm not glad that I was off medications for as long as I was, but I am glad. I'm just honestly relieved in so many ways that it is this easy now. It really is. And I understand this is not the same in every state. I'm in California, so I'm very lucky to be here. Just for the fact that they definitely do not have all the weird rules or the weird Republican bullshit that seems to be happening everywhere else in all the southern conservative states, right? But I'm doing pretty well. At least on that front, and everything else. Actually, after conquering that hill, it's made everything else just a little bit more easier. Like it doesn't seem as overwhelming as it once did, and I have assurance now that I'm going to be able to continue on medication. I feel good about the cost. I don't feel like it's, an extravagant cost or anything, especially for how much I'm getting. And I'm definitely dealing with doctors who want to work with me and help me progress in a safe way and will monitor that. But also, like they told me very upfront, like, we want to start you off on a base dosage, which, this was great. I was very happy about that. I was not complaining. And then they were like, and then as the months go on, we won't hold you back. We will, as long as everything looks good, we will help you get where you want to go. And I even learned a lot more about, like, if I ever did choose a path of wanting to get surgery as well, because there's many gender affirming surgeries available. And if my insurance comes through, many of them, or some of them rather, would be covered depending on what I'm needing. And actually hearing about some of the new things going on is kind of crazy. Um, we ended up in a conversation talking about, like, bottom surgery, right? So let's say at any point, if I ever decided that I wanted, because there's a few various surgeries that obviously I could get an, or what is it? How do you say it? Orchirectomy? Am I saying that right? I'm always saying this stuff. And I'm like, I hear it out loud. I'm like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. I should know how to say this shit. I see it all the time. I know what it is, but I cannot for the life of me remember medical terms. I really can't. I mean, I said Spiro on here. I was trying to avoid saying Spironolactone, right? Because I always screw that up. I always call it Spirolactone, and I miss the ono in the middle. Anyway, but yes, I could have a surgery that involves that, or I could have a full GRS or gender reassignment surgery, which may have a different term now. I'm not exactly sure on that. But anyway, there are various surgeries that I could have. And the interesting one that I heard about was there's an experimental surgery where trying to describe it, I would mutilate it. So let me just put it in the very simplest terms. It's how do I put this? Best of both worlds. Which makes me think, well, kind of best of the worst of both as well. But I guess there's experimental surgeries that are happening where I guess individuals, and I don't know of, like, maybe it's not even actually happening, so I can't really say. It could just be like my physician was talking about, like, things that they're trying to do or they're doing research on at the moment, or maybe they've done it in a lab animal, or I don't know. I have no idea. But essentially, yeah, there are various surgeries and there's other things coming up in the future that, if it were true, I mean, honestly, there's certain things that I would kind of think, well, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say, like, do I see myself having surgery in the near future? No. I mean, the most that I would do would probably be cosmetic. I've never had a prominent Adam's apple. Like, that's just, if you look at my profile, I hate my profile, but it's like, even when I've been actually really thin, I've never had a prominent Adam's apple, so I wouldn't even know if I would, like, even get that shaved. Maybe some cosmetic surgeries, but nothing too dramatic. Maybe to do with my nose. I have a slope in my nose that I don't really care for, and I also have some under eye bags that I've actually seen people get pretty good surgery where they've had those lifted, and very minimally noticed. Right, I wouldn't do fillers. I don't know. There's various things I definitely wouldn't do, but there are some things that I'm open to, and as I get older, maybe I'll consider them. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I am back on my medications, and look, I if anything, I'm just pursuing more. I've been doing the work with my mental health, and soon I should have access to a few things. I'm actually looking to get tested now for ADHD, because I was thinking, like, after my doctor was talking to me about it, because they were suspecting that maybe I should get tested after a few things that I talked about, and also after hearing, like, the experiences. I guess I had a misunderstanding, and this is all too common, right? Like, we think we understand something, and often we don't. We have a lot of misconception. Or we know of one person's experience and it didn't seem to match us, so we kind of ruled it out, not thinking that, yes, you can have something, and people in that, who are diagnosed the same, maybe have various experiences that are not totally similar, and then a few key ones that are absolutely the case. So anyway, for me, this is one battle won, and I intend to win the war. Yeah, so we'll end it like that. Thank you so much for joining me here again this week. I would encourage you, if you've been listening to the podcast, if you like what I share, I would strongly encourage you to go check out our Patreon page, which is just relaunched. And I've got to fix the show outro because I think it mentions L Nichols for the Patreon. It's not that anymore. It is patreon.com/elemental, and not spell like elemental, but L-A mental. Link is now in the description below. If you'd be willing to even do $3 a month, or even lower, right? Even lower, it doesn't matter, right? If you'd be willing to give anything in contribution toward the podcast, it really helps, me continue this and pay for operational costs with server hosting and other various things. And I don't know, maybe we'll buy a meal or two for me. I also have other levels and other bonuses. So if you want to go check that out, I'm pretty happy with the tier levels that I came up with. And I think you should go check them out, at least just for a good laugh. Anyway, thank you so much, you lovely, beautiful people, for joining me here once again. And I'm going to leave you like I always do. Go live your life to the fullest and escape the ordinary. Goodbye, everybody.
This concludes this entry of the Elemental Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to houseofl.com to gain access to our show notes, additional podcasts, the photo diary, and more. If you're feeling financially benevolent and would like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/elemental, and for as little as $1 per entry, you'll get an ad-free version of this podcast, patron-only monthly live stream Q&As, and Elle's everlasting gratitude. Music was provided by Damn the Witch Siren, featuring the songs Big Mouth and Soft and Blue. All music was used with the artist's permission. If you want to hear more of their incredible music, go to damnthewitchsiren.com. For inquiries, questions, or last letters, email info@lnichols.com or visit the contact page at houseofl.com. The Elemental Podcast is a subsidiary of House of L. Copyright 2019, all rights reserved.